Thank you. We are now at the first Charter Revision Committee meeting of 2023 and also the last Charter Revision Committee meeting of 2023.
Unless we have a special call.
Unless we have a specially called meeting of 2023, which quite frankly, I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. So we're going to go ahead and open up the meeting. I didn't see anybody on the list for public comment, so we're going to dispense with that. If y'all want to double check it, that's great. Do we have another committee member coming in?
Yes.
I will hold for just a moment. Mr. Prepty, how are you?
How are y'all?
All right, well, we have just started this meeting. We're going to exercise just an informational format for this, just to make sure everybody understands the direction that we're going to take, how we're going to move forward, and some of the decisions that we'll be making. We're not going to be addressing any kind of specific suggestions for charter amendments at this particular meeting. What we'll do subsequent to this is put it out to the entire council to start submitting those, and then we'll move forward after that. The way I'd like to start is just share with you the packet of information that's before you. You'll see a tentative timeline. Yeah, here you go. Here you go.
Thank you.
You'll see, he needs a tentative timeline too. Yeah, we go. You'll see a tentative timeline for charter amendments. You'll also see the dates specific if we were to show for the August 24th election on that ballot. You'll also see the dates that are specific for the November 2024 election if we decide to move forward for that date. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Also in your packet, you'll see just some examples of submissions in the past. You'll also see on the top sheet prior submissions that were not selected to go on referendum that I thought were important enough for us to resubmit in the coming term for discussion and consideration again. You'll also see on the second through probably 6th page, straight from the charter, how you amend it. And I specifically notated just the highlights in each of the chapters just to give us some good reference points. And then you'll see at the back the summary of previous amendments to the charter to give y'all an idea of what this looks like. And I know 3 of you have done this in the past term. I did it back in the day, and Mr. Prepty, welcome.
Thank you.
It's a process, but we're glad to have your head here. So, with no further ado, I think I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Darby and Ms. Zeitlin to share with us just the basics of the scope of and importance of the charter amendments and what we're actually doing to our, Margaret likes to call it the Constitution, and I call it our Articles of Incorporation. So needless to say, it bears great significance, needs to be timely, and so I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to y'all. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I think most of you probably know this, and you're familiar with these concepts. Oh, here comes another.
Hi. Thank you for joining us.
I always look at the charter as the constitution for our little local government here. It is it's the foundational document. It was originally adopted in 1962 and effective in 63, I believe. Just kind of creates the floor of the legal substance that we stand on when we are moving forward with all of the work that we do or you do as council members. So it has provisions in there to make it somewhat difficult to amend, right? We can't just go on the council floor and decide to amend provisions in the charter. We go through this long process with the committee, and then it goes through review with a charter revision commission, and
Jesus, I'm sorry.
any changes. And then any changes go before the voters. So the voters are the ultimate arbiters and deciders about what changes happen to essentially our constitution, our charter. you know, all these decisions that we make should not be taken lightly. They're long-term changes. They're intended to be around for a really long time. We can't go back and just, you know, easily, you know, tweak it or amend it later, because again, it has to go to a referendum vote to the citizens of Davidson County for an amendment. And those are kind of the philosophical ways of looking at charter revisions.
Anybody have any questions or comments at this point?
So,
Okay.
thank you. So, I know as it says somewhere on the first page, I think, like, we get 2 swings at the bat in a council term, right? We get 2 times that we can submit, or that we can begin a referendum, right? And we're not limited as to the number of things that they can vote on, but we can only initiate a referendum election twice in our 4-year term, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
And I'm correct that there's technically no limit on how many.
There are no limits on how many items can go into that the referendum vote. We've done several in the past. One of the things that we did change in the section 19 during the last term was we don't have standalone referendum elections to amend the charter any longer. They will always go to a general election, whether it's one of the August elections or a November election.
And I mean, I don't know that we need to get into this right now necessarily or deep into it, but there's pending litigation, and at some point we'll get an answer to that litigation, especially about the size of the council. And so is it safe for me to assume that if we lose that lawsuit, then something's gonna have to change in the charter because of the change of the body? Or
It's hard at this point to say what that looks like, what
Right.
the outcome of that litigation might look like. The way the state drafted their legislation, we don't have to amend our charter to be able to comply with their the new statute. So, you know, when we were kind of going through that process earlier this year, you know, we were looking at I think they were allowing us to make the reduction and choose the districts and stuff by resolution even, so something really short form.
Are you going down the path of, is that gonna take away one of our referendum options? Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I don't think
No.
so. Again, it kind of depends on how the court comes out and what their decision is. But
let me follow up with an additional question, if I may. So, we were discussing it, when we were in flux, last term, and we were going through some of the process that included planning, giving recommendations to planning, so they could do redistricting. The word like superdelegate came up, or super districts came up. If we did something like that, would that require a charter amendment change? Since that's not a term that appears anywhere in the charter.
At this point, I think that would require a charter amendment. But again, I'm reluctant to make too many predictions because I don't know what the determination of the courts or the appeal process might look like.
Sure.
I mean, right now, they're kind of looking at just the legislation on its face and to determine whether it's constitutional or not. So if they did an up or down vote, you know, if they did an upvote for the state law, then we would be back in that position to be able to do it by resolution and not referendum vote or a charter amendment.
Okay, but that is part of what I wanted to know, is do we need one for that?
No, I mean, it's my understanding that whatever we do related to districts and how we come up with that in response to that constitutional, whatever they say, would be by resolution, and it would be, sorry, I've got too much stuff.
Mr. Rutherford?
On the issue of the super districts, and at-large positions in general, I remember that the, law director, Wally Dietz, addressed that, because he said that that is not addressed, number one, in the state law, and it is in the charter, so it was his opinion at the time, not the super districts, but the at-large, but because it's in the charter that we had to have the at-large positions, otherwise we had to amend the charter to not have them, because it was part of that argument that was being raised about whether or not to do away with the at-large position if we were forced to downsize the council. And so the super districts would, in all likelihood, fall under that as well. We would have to amend the charter, because it's not currently in there if we wanted to have them.
But if,
That was
if
his
we,
take at the time.
But this will not take away either of our two opportunities to amend the charter. We still have two opportunities to amend the charter during this term. What happens with the lawsuit doesn't change that.
I mean, it kind of sounded like what a few things that we just said might, it might take one if there are certain things we want to change.
No,
But
because-
were you saying that if we,
No, we're not limited to the number of amendments.
right,
So we could have, if this comes down to pass and hypothetically we have to make amendments to the charter, then we may need 50 amendments to the charter, we don't know. So we have 50 plus whatever else we think needs to be addressed, and that's just,
yeah, I get that part. It's
Okay.
just that it comes in one of the two. Like if we use two early on in the term and then we get, but I want to,
that's gonna be, go ahead.
Well, and that kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier, we can't just initiate a referendum election. We can only hold the referendum election during the general election cycle. So 2025, there's no amendment of the charter. 2024 and 2026 are the two times when we would be able to amend.
Okay.
Well, I guess
So that's pretty well
2027.
already described.
Technically, but it'd be
2027.
kind of,
Awkward to do it
Yeah.
during a
but if I could go
election.
back to, I want to understand something
Sure.
Councilman Rutherford said.
We're talking about this.
That Wally Deet, that Director Deet said, are you saying that he said that if we don't have any at-large positions at all, that we have to amend the charter?
That's what he told us when he addressed us on the floor in a special meeting that we had to hear from him. That was raised, and he said it was his opinion at the time that we would have to do a charter change if we wanted to eliminate the at-large position, because the existing charter calls for at-large positions, and the state law doesn't address that one way or the other.
state law was addressing number.
And I hope this,
not type
It
of
addresses the number, but
positions.
not type of positions. Yeah.
and obviously I hope this is something that we don't have to worry about and that we succeed and we get to determine the size and makeup of our council.
but I think planning made a pretty compelling case that in order to comply with election laws for equality and all that fun stuff that those rules, they have to, that the at-large position is necessary.
I don't remember it exactly that way. I remember them saying that there were two that had the most, that there were two makeups that had the most diversity, and it was 20 and 0 and 15 and 5. I believe I remember them saying that. But we don't need to get too deep into this
Yeah, I
right
was
now.
gonna say, this
we're-
is more
we're in the weeds at this
informative.
point,
Yeah.
but-
I think this is more informative, as I shared, just to talk about process. And, yeah, I think we're in the weeds, for sure. So, but we get that way, right, guys?
I have a
That's who we
question.
are. Yes.
Because I had asked you earlier about, to look up something for me, because I think it's at least worth a conversation. Is it worth moving to referendum or not? But I don't know, but is there anything in our charter that if we change the charter that the state would have to sort of agree to, or is it that, like, that it's tied? For example, I'll just tell you the situation. So today, I had an issue where somebody needed the police, so I forwarded that to our CET team. And he was like, hey, we're tied up, they were closing a homeless, the TDOT was closing a homeless encampment underneath the I-24 overpass, which is the right-of-way of the interstate, which is a TDOT thing. And he goes, so we're all tied up, I can't send somebody over there. And I'm like, are the state troopers there? He's like, no, they refuse to do it. So I'm like, what? So I called the commander and he was like, yeah, he goes, there's something in our charter, and of course he didn't have the specifics, but he said there's something in the charter where when we became a metropolitan government, they said, well, you're getting money for that. And so the state, they'll pull over people on, they'll do traffic tickets and things like that. But as far as providing a security type function, if there's something going, you know what I mean? Like what happened today, which I think doesn't even make sense. That's not what they do. And in fact, up until very recently, I think we had one state trooper assigned to the entirety of Davidson County. They're adding to that, but not necessarily to help with enforcement. So I just figured, like, that makes no sense that we've got our MNPD officers we have a super high call for service. We had 2 domestics at the time. I had somebody violent at the Walmart. That was just at one point in time for one little area that we're babysitting while TDOT's doing some maintenance work for just in general maintenance So he was like, it would have to be something in the charter. And I thought, well, so if we changed that, that would require for the state to actually step in at some point, right? So would the state have to agree to it is sort of, you know what I mean? Because it's sort of tied together.
I think that we would need to look into that a little
Okay.
bit more.
But I just wondered if there's
We'll be kind of-
things
we started down that path of looking into answering your question, but we don't have an answer yet.
yeah, I just didn't know if that was like a thing where things were tied together that,
I mean, if we,
We'll just look,
into
okay.
it, but we'll take that.
So one of the reasons that we're having the meeting now is because there are things like that we've already identified that need to be researched in order for us to identify what a charter amendment may look like. And so I'm glad we're getting started now. Okay, anything else pending in your head? Yes, Mr. Cash.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Does this work like regular legislation in that if the mayor's office wants to submit something, it's kind of considered administrative legislation, or does it have to originate in council?
It will need to originate with the council, and often what happens is the administration will also submit requests to this committee to review, to determine whether it goes into the resolution.
And the charter, the chair of this committee would be one of the, if we take it, it would be, the chair of this committee would be one of the, it would have to come to this committee, if not others.
Yeah, it has to start with the committee, and it gets reviewed by the Charter Revision Commission once we decide on something, once we file it, and then it moves through the regular council process.
So it goes to the Charter Revision Commission before we have to vote with a 2/3 vote? Okay.
We drive the bus and stop along the way to pick people up.
but most of the charter revision things that we did last time were initiated by departments, not council members. I mean, we had a lot of council member requests, but it got narrowed down to this. So it comes from departments, but it all comes here, sort of comes into a big pot.
Having not served on this committee prior, in terms of how it works for something coming out of here, if we decide on something we think should go forward as a committee, and then there's something else that we think should not go forward, does what we think not, or should not go forward, is that still reviewed by anyone beyond us? Like regular committees, things that fail out of committee still go before the full council?
I don't believe so, I'm right.
No, because this body will be the entity that drafts a resolution to take to the council floor.
So if we don't do it, it doesn't happen? Okay.
Yeah, all things will be submitted to us. We'll get the reviews done, we'll get the research done, and then we'll make the decision about the wording and what goes on the floor. We'll have the final say over that, and then the council will ultimately decide up or down on each individual amendment, and then it'll go to the Charter Revision Committee. They'll bless it or not, and then it'll move on to referendum. It'll go to the Election Commission, and then they'll put it on the ballot. If you look,
Can I just interject? I just want to make sure
Yes.
I'm clear on something, because the charter amendment section to amend the charter, it does say that the council initiates amendments. So our internal process is everything comes to this committee to be vetted before going to the council floor, and this committee is the entity that crafts the resolution. So it's not in the charter that we have a committee that does this, but that is our process.
if you look here, it'll give you the list, and I've highlighted all the pertinent steps insofar as what needs to be included. And we will be sharing this with all council members and asking for their submissions Monday?
No, January 31st.
Well, this is just this is the draft. And I
Oh.
think she'll put it out to let everybody know that they can submit, but that may be the submission deadline. That doesn't necessarily need to start.
Yeah,
We haven't baked that yet.
yeah, we can change the timeline for asking for submissions.
This is just a draft.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, next, let's go through this timeline and just not necessarily look at the dates, but if you will, just take a look at the steps. And I believe, we're gonna need more than 2 work sessions. That's gonna depend, obviously, on the number of amendments and the depth of the amendment and the research that needs to be done. But, we've got 2 work sessions put in here. Margaret and I have talked, and Hannah have talked today again about, do we shoot for August or do we shoot for November? And we don't want to encumber us in the middle of budget. However, you also don't want to speed through February and March so that we meet the deadline for an August ballot and maybe do it too fast and miss something. So we need to make the determination, do we want to shoot for April and then be ready for the August election for referendum? Or, well, let me back up. And if we shoot for it, it doesn't look like we're gonna make it, we're gonna have maybe more work sessions, or there's a need for a second deferral because we've only got 1 deferral built in here. Then we can push it to the November. Or we can say, we really don't wanna push this, given the number, and then we'll go to November. That is not a decision that we need to make today. We can wait to make that decision, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can make that decision once we know how many submissions we've got to go through. I am going to call on.
Courtney was first.
Yeah, I'm going to call on Courtney first and then John.
So having gone through this 2 years ago, I would say, even if you tried to shoot for April, it's not gonna happen. We've got a lot of new people, everything's super new, you've got coming off the holidays, so January is kind of, I just think that's really rushed. And then once you get all of your list, it takes at least 1, maybe 2 meetings to even narrow it down, because to Tom's question of, are we limited to the number of items on each rep? We're not, but understanding that the voter has a certain amount of capacity to read through all of this. I mean, it's like page after page after page. So what we sort of discussed last time was, depending on the length of the description, 3 to 5 is really a max of what you want to put on there. And so you have, it's really sort of a delicate process to weed out, prioritize and weed out some things, and then to go through the process of the commission and then the council and all that kind of stuff, and to really have our ducks in a row. I would say to not add any more stress to an already decently stressful thing and just say November, is what I would say. But we don't have to make the decision, I'm just
Right. John?
giving my opinion.
I think mine adds on to hers in a way, because what I was gonna say is that between the 2 elections, whether or not you can logistically hit the earlier one or not, November is a general election. It has a higher turnout. Therefore, that's probably the best one to put it on because of the turnout factor. Just my thought on it.
Well, I happen to agree.
Okay.
Anybody over here want to?
Just a technical question.
Sure.
Do they appear on the ballot in the order that we approve them?
Yes,
I think that's the way it has happened in the past, so.
even the wording.
Yeah, the wording.
The wording and everything is exactly the same,
No, I get that the wording's the same.
but it's in
Like
whatever
if
order.
we can't pass for and then say, oh, but we'd rather put this one first or this one.
I think you would, yeah,
We
you
would
would
go ahead and do that on the
order
front.
them
You do, yeah.
the way that you'd want them ordered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, we can decide that as a committee rather than.
yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Anything else to add about that? Cap, do you have anything? You looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh, no, not at the moment. Thank you.
All right, great. So I think that takes care of timeline. Be thinking about it, because that's something that we'll address pretty early on and just get that baked. Review of prior charter revisions. I don't know that we need to go through each one, but if you go to the back, and it says reference use only, this dates back to 1963. So if you're a historian, you would like to know all of the charter amendments that have happened, here's your guide. And
You need to go to sleep.
exactly. But just in terms of knowing how many have gone through and looking at it, you know, year over year, it'll give you a sense of what was changed. It'll show you any trends. So,
You know what hits me off the bat, seeing this, because I've actually never seen this, so I appreciate you putting that together. It's like 1963. So kind of a long time ago, and this isn't a lot, which I agree with. Like, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to change the state constitution. It's a big deal to change our charter. It should be a big deal. But this doesn't happen very often, and so either that says it's a really great charter, or it says it needs an overhaul. I don't know which one it is. What do you think? I don't know. There's a lot of people that think we need an overhaul on the charter, but anyway, you could look at it both ways.
anyway, and then you'll see at the last, I added 2022's amendment, so that you will see those. Anybody have any questions or needs to discuss this further? Again, I just wanted you to have it for a historical perspective and reference when we start going through the process. Okay, next
Wait,
steps.
Sorry, one more thing.
Sure.
Near the last page of the highlighted stuff,
Okay.
B says, the commission shall have the following powers and duties: to make recommendations to the council with respect to amendments to the charter. Does that mean we send them one and they can make recommendations, or can they make recommendations all on their own before we start considering?
I think they can make recommendations on their own.
Do they meet, like, quarterly
I
and
think that they really only meet
when they need to?
Yeah, I mean,
Within 30 days after.
I think they really only meet when we present something to them, but if something was, you know, important enough, I guess they could get together and meet. And I haven't looked back through that list of amendments to see if any of those were originally, you know, initiated by the commission. And now when I say initiated, I mean, you know.
Any other questions, comments? All righty, next steps.
Can I add one more thing, just
Yes, because I'm gonna let you take this.
by
for
way of
next steps.
information?
Yes.
Is, we have a SharePoint site set up for the Charter Revision Committee. If you go to the website, on the left-hand side, there's a bar that says navigation. Click on it, scroll down, council resources. On that page, you will get to the Charter Revision Committee site. It's a SharePoint. You can go in there, you can see what the documents that were created for the last term. You can see different amendments and the petitions that were filed and the resolutions that have been filed with the council. There will be a section in there for all of the working documents that this committee creates, so all of this will be uploaded to the SharePoint, so you'll have that. This list of all the, prior amendments that was created by the former clerk, those are already up there. Anyway, there's a good bit of information already loaded up there if you wanna go, check it out. So that's my 2-cent plug for the,
Yeah,
and it's open to the public, it's, it's.
Everybody has access to
Everyone
it,
has
which is
access.
great. And I think it's important that at least we make a point to go in and review it. Even though I've done this before, the sense of being able to get in there and refresh it and renew it is super helpful. So I advise it. Next steps, I'll let you take that.
Okay, well, we will, if we will get this packet, I'll send it out as we discussed to all the council. We were going to ask for submissions. The tentative deadline says to ask for them on the 31st of January, but we can go ahead and send something out and ask for the deadline to still be February 9th.
Right.
And just get everybody thinking about what types of submissions they wanna make. We will then compile those, we'll have them in a document that looks similar to this, but a lot longer, presumably. And that will be uploaded onto the SharePoint, so y'all be able to see it. Of course, we'll email it out to the committee members. Yeah, so that's the notice to council member and committee members about the next steps for submissions.
Do we know how many recommendations there were last time?
Like 45?
We've got a list,
There were a lot, we have a list of the recommendations from last time. We kind of started out with a list of things that were resubmit, or submissions from prior terms but not resubmitted and what have you.
Yeah.
And then we have a prioritization list that we kind of went through towards the end. And those things, I believe, are on the SharePoint for the last term.
Sorry, 45 recommendations from this committee or 45 things this committee
Came
considered?
from multiple different area, yeah. It was a conglomeration.
You mean that came to this committee or that came out of this
No,
committee?
came to the
Okay,
committee.
got it.
Yeah.
From the full body,
Got it.
that
And a lot
first
of them, I
recommendation.
mean, there's a number of them that are like, maybe this isn't even appropriate for a charter amendment,
Yeah.
so, you know.
Can you
We'll help you
speak
pull
to the
through.
criteria that a suggestion rises to the level of being appropriate for a charter amendment?
It kind of goes back to this idea that the charter is our foundation, that the changes that we make to it need to be forward-looking. They need to be things that will stand the test of time. So, you know, if we want to, you know, create a new commission, is that something that is, you know, a commission that might be around for 10 years and then we don't need it any longer? Or is it a commission that we need until, you know, for another 60 years? Like, so that's kind of what we want to look at, like things that are foundational to the operation and the creation and the continuance of a government.
And we also had a situation where there was a couple of things that would have been preempted by the state. So you kind of want to avoid that. Obviously, it's sort of a waste of an item.
Good point.
So there's that.
You know, we have, and it's on the list here of things that were selected for resubmission, and this was something that came up during the last term that we didn't really think about, I guess, at some point, and that was what happens when, you know, a director steps down, a director of finance steps down. Like, how do things continue? There's no deputy in that office, created by charter. And so when charter requires that this person do all of these activities and then they're not there any longer, who does them? How does that operate? And so is that something that's appropriate for the charter? Maybe it's something
And
we're
that wasn't
discussing.
just theoretical either. That actually happened, and we had a little bit of a major problem, actually, because we were going in front of bonds.
Yep.
And we needed the director in place, and he wasn't, and we had to, anyway, it was a mess, so.
Still scrambling.
Yeah, and we had charter amendments after, you know, the resignation of the mayor like 5 years ago, because that kind of exposed some flaws and maybe like the line of succession and all that stuff. So it is kind of like, the charter can kind of seem to work great until something happens that's never happened before, and then you kind of maybe see something, okay, we need to fix that.
Anybody have any other questions, comments? Yes, ma'am?
And this may require some research, but recent court rulings regarding home rule in our charter as it relates to state preemption, state constitution. Because when you bring up state preemption in terms of our charter, we use the home rule argument to protect decisions that we've made that are in compliance with our charter, even though the state has tried to preempt it. So how does that all play into, when we're amending the charter? If we put it into the charter, is it safe?
I mean, it's safe to a point, because if the state can decide to try to preempt it, and then we get back in a litigation stature again. And, you know, even those cases where we have won, I think there's still some appeals that are happening, so we're still kind of in an area where, you know, we're trying to protect our charter and kind of the sanctity of our charter through litigations. Until that all kind of plays out, we don't know how it's going to absolutely affect our charter.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
We did vote on something.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.